podcast. Hell yeah, brother. Overload, brother.
Beats by @Smoke M2D6.
Welcome to part 2 of the Seattle Overload Mailbag. This is the defense episode. We're very excited. We also have exciting Seahawks news to start the episode with, and also troubling Seahawks news. Hey, so we're getting right into it now as training camp's kicked off. I've already been told off by the team, so doing real good. Griffin, Ty, how's it going?
Doing a little bit better than you, considering the a certain call that you received today from a certain team that will remain nameless.
Interesting.
But yeah, doing great. How are you, Griff?
Yeah, it's a little tone deaf of you guys to ask me that, considering it's hardly been 24 hours since KJ Wright retired. But besides that, I'm doing fine, I guess.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know we're all in a state of mourning. It's okay.
Well, it's 2:30 in the morning, actually.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
You're literally in a state of mourning right
I
now.
am.
Now,
Caffeinated.
What do you call that when a word has not two different meanings? Never mind. We're not going there.
Two different mornings?
No. Like, it sounds the same, but it's spelled differently. There's a word for it.
A homophone?
Is it a homophone?
What did you just call me?
No, you're very progressive, Ty, and not problematic. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the podcast.
That's true.
Each two of the words are the same pronunciation, but different meanings are spelled. Okay, you're right. Homophone. All right, there we go.
Oh, I nailed it. Let's go.
Okay, very good. We're off to a good start.
Here we go.
A-level English. What do you guys have at high school? Just SATs?
Yeah.
GPA?
Yeah, SATs are the tests you take.
Okay.
Yeah. Then you have then you have like a GPA, right? Through high school, college, etc.
Yeah.
Is that like a GPS or?
And no. Definitely unrelated.
So KJ Wright retired. That was kind of expected, given that he said he'd only played for the Seahawks, and it was pretty clear that Seattle's linebacker room had moved on from KJ. As much as we'd have liked to have seen that, as much as we rated KJ, and honestly, yeah, he's 33 years old, but like his zone coverage wasn't the sort which would have declined with age. Like he was never the quickest. He was always one of the smartest, and his smarts would only ever have increased.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely room for him on an NFL roster out there. I don't know why he didn't get more offers, but and he always should have been looking at more than veteran minimum. But it seemed like for the veteran minimum, he wasn't going to play anywhere with Seattle. And like you said, Seattle there's no room for him. But the guy can still play.
Well, the thing with a 33-year-old off-ball linebacker as well is they're not going to be able to contribute in special teams, which is an important part of that position. And then KJ can't really rush the passer to the extent that a 33-year-old on-ball or kind of edge linebacker would. So you don't actually see that many 33-year-old linebackers for that reason.
Right.
So that sucks. But that season after 2020, where he was outstanding, playing a bit of on-ball as well, really, the fact he only got what he got from the Raiders, I mean, it shows how little the position is valued in the NFL, but it did suck. But at least he got a last hurrah in Las Vegas.
Yeah, he looked good. At times last year as well.
Yeah, he was a good player for the Raiders.
Yeah. I mean, hell of a player. Hell of a career for him. Absolute legend, Seahawks legend. Going to be in the Ring of Honor one day. Loved watching KJ Wright play every Sunday, for the last 10 or so years. So it's really sad that he's retiring, but I mean, I don't know if you guys watched the video of him signing his one-day contract, but like they did all the research and they were going through like all the games he had played, like 230 games and stuff like that. That's a lot, man. That's a lot, especially for a linebacker, taking all those hits and everything, all those tackles that he's. Man, I was in my feels a little bit. Yeah, I was in my feels a little bit. Yeah.
Griff?
I got misty-eyed.
Yeah.
I'm not someone that's afraid to cry often, but this one didn't
It's good to cry.
I got misty-eyed for sure.
Misty-eyed.
Yeah.
Okay, should we do the other bad news? Jamal Adams is
Yeah.
well, he was it's funny actually because I was watching eagle-eyed, hawk-eyed, much better, the training camp day one live stream, being a degenerate, trying to glean primarily defensive scheme from it. And where was Jamal Adams? He was on the sideline, and Ryan Neal was taking a heck of a lot of snaps. I was like, I guess Adams is had a tweak or is maybe slightly not quite right, or just trying to get reps for Neal. But then he was not at day 2 of training camp.
Yeah, I think. I mean, at least okay. Let's start with silver linings. It's nothing lower body related. It's not the shoulder, and so obviously,
isn't the shoulder upper body?
Yeah, it's not lower body. It's not shoulder. Those statements don't conflict, do they?
Sorry, there's a comma. Yeah.
Okay. So it's the hand thing. Yeah, it's weird because obviously he made a big deal about how it's fully functional now for what it can be, because he said he still can't make a complete fist because his fingers are permanently bent. But he said he's felt good to go, but it's not encouraging that the second day or first day of camp something isn't feeling right. And what can that mean? Did he do something to it, or is he just wondering if what he's feeling is supposed to feel that way? Is it mental? Is he adapting to it? Obviously nothing came up during mini camp, and I think he was full go for that in OTAs. So what is happening? Is it when he's making tackles now that there's a little more contact allowed, or at least during tackling drills and stuff? So what's happening here? Did he slam it on something? So I don't know. I don't like the sound of it, but I'm going to remain optimistic and just wait and see with this, because what else can you do? It's still very early in camp.
Yeah, like you said, Griff, at least it's not a leg thing. At least it's not something with his shoulder, specifically the one that he just had surgery on, obviously. At least it's none of those things, right? It's the hand, which, I mean, guys can play through hand things, even defensive backs sometimes. So, we'll see.
It's weird how he brought it up earlier this offseason. And I mean, the fact he brought it up, the reporters didn't ask him about it, that suggests that he was, it's weighing on his mind. It would if you can't bend your fingers like you used to, and they got fused. I don't really know what you can do though from now. Maybe like someone in my mentions was saying about maybe having someone massage it, like to get some comfort there. I don't know. It must have just been shocking and shedding on a dummy or something, or maybe a ball pings off it at a weird angle. I always seem to hurt my fingers when trying to catch footballs, which maybe that is a lack of gloves or maybe a lack of soft hands. But I don't know. Hopefully Jamal is able to get comfortable soon, because this is his third off season now. The third with the Seahawks and the third off season for him where it's been truncated, because first 2 years COVID made it weird. Everyone's been speaking about that at the moment. Jordyn Brooks mentioned it today, and now with Adams missing because of his hand, he's gonna hopefully get back soon. But if not, that lack of chemistry in the secondary with the new coverages, well, they're not new, but new language at least, and all that kind of deal. He needs to be there. So that sucks.
Right. Yeah, it's frustrating, but I don't think we need to panic yet. It's just too early, and I think it's too minor ultimately.
Yeah, like when is the first preseason game? Like 2.5 weeks from now? 2 weeks? Then?
Yeah.
So,
and he's probably not seeing a lot of action in that anyway. So
August 13th, I think. Or I'm confused though because it's at midnight, so it might be August 12th. But for me, it's August 13th. Anyway, so the good news: DK Metcalf, DeKalen, great name.
DeKalen Zacharias,
absolutely astonishingly good name. He signed his deal finally, so he sat out held in the first 2 training camp games, and he's been signed to in my opinion, it's a pretty good deal. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it seems like they. Oh, go ahead, Ty.
Oh, no. You go ahead. I was just gonna, real quick. I was just gonna say that I think it's kind of a win-win for both sides.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I'll explain in a second. Griff, you go ahead.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was
you
going to say
teased.
I thought maybe the APY could have been higher, the per year could have been higher, but it seems like there's a compromise on keeping that just below a certain mark from Seattle's perspective and compromising with the higher signing bonus. But it also sounds like that was connected to a capitulation on the year 2 guarantees. Ty,
Yeah,
is
so
that where you're going with that?
wow, you're connected. But just real quick, before Ty jumps in, 3 years, $72 million with $30 million signing bonus. So that's a high amount of guarantees for a receiver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the what are the guarantees? Aren't they like the most for a receiver ever or something?
Yeah.
I think I read something like that. Yeah. So, yeah, I thought the APY would be higher. Frankly, just considering what the likes of Devontae, Tyreek, etc. got this offseason, and considering like obviously DK's not on their level, but he's younger and he's kind of on that trajectory, or at least he and his agent could have made that argument. So yeah, so I was a little surprised that it came in at 24 per, but I think this is obviously for that reason, that's a great deal for the Seahawks, all things considered. When you look at the rest of the market, I think it's also in general just a really good deal for DK as well, because he's going to get back to free agency at the age of 27.
Yeah,
it's going to be right in the middle of his prime,
yeah.
So he's going to get paid again, like barring anything crazy or unforeseen that happens in the next couple of years. Like he's going to get broken off again, and at that point the cap is going to be even higher. So what is he even going to make at that point? Like a ton. So
yeah. Yeah, it's a win-win, and it goes without saying, but they have him for the next 4 years. Seattle was intent on bringing him back, extending him, not bringing him back, all offseason. That was the messaging. So it's abundantly evident that this was they had identified him as a pillar, a core player on their team, and which anyone would, but it's just cool to see like they're rallying around the guys that they think are the most talented and important pieces moving forward. So it's just nice to get that squared away.
Yeah, culturally as well, as well as a pillar, I think, Ty, when you mentioned, you're wondering if it was a bit higher, the reference point really is that Terry McLaurin 3-year, $71 million deal. And compared to McLaurin, they're both in similar situations in that both teams don't have really a long-term quarterback answer. Perhaps, sorry, Griff, don't get too upset there. And so, it gives, as well as giving them a chance an extra payday, it gives them a chance maybe to not be on a bad offense, work with a good quarterback again. That being said, the chemistry DK showed with Geno Smith was exciting. So
right, the usage will be interesting to see. I mean, results will be what they are, but the usage changes will be intriguing to look
right
for.
now, I think McLaurin's probably a more rounded and probably better receiver. I don't know. That's a tough one because of Metcalf's athletic
It's hard to quantify better, but I think more well-rounded,
more polished,
at least more versatile makes sense.
Yes, but Seattle has Lockett, so
yeah, the issue too that kind of like separates those guys, at least in terms of like, well, and I guess they ended up signing pretty similar deals, but when you're just kind of talking about like those guys are stacking them up against one another, it's like, well, DK has like the star power on top of everything. Like everyone knows DK Metcalf. Like I think we all understand that here. Like Terry McLaurin, though, kind of falls under the radar. Right. Unfortunately, he's an incredible receiver. It's just DK just has that kind of like extra like marketability on top of everything else. Yeah. It makes the organization more money. That's what it comes down to.
That's a good point.
They needed that, right? They really needed that because who else is there on the roster who's young and could be like a legit superstar? And that's the thing as well.
Well,
DK can be like crazy good if he kind of.
Oh, by the way, real quick, we got confirmation that Jordyn Brooks is playing the mic. What'd you guys think about that?
Middle linebacker. That was they were kind of going back and forth on that all through the offseason, like kind of implying it, but then implying the reverse. So now this is
all of the training camp clips I've seen of him have been him at will, like what we'd call will. So
weird.
That's
so weird.
And also, he's miking the fact that he calls the plays. So
we should reiterate though, again, terminology might be different now, but I mean, again, Seattle already was a 3-4 structured team last year and the year before, but it was a little different last year than it was in 2020. But then even from there, like the Mike and Will spots already are inside linebacker positions. So him moving, like what I'm saying is they're calling both spots inside linebacker. Clint Hurt used that language, but to say Mike and Will still works. They're just synonyms really. So like nothing actually changes. Like Will isn't outside unless it's a specific front where you're on the line of scrimmage. Like they're both off ball inside players.
They'll both be off ball inside. The predominantly one of them will fit the A gap most of the time, and then one of them will fit the C gap most of the time.
Right.
All right, are we ready to get into questions?
Yeah, give us your sack.
All right, let's
your mailbag.
Yes, let me whip out my sack here.
Mm-hmm.
Take out some questions. This one comes from our good buddy Shiv Ramdis. Now, with camp like a week away, looking at the lines around the division and conference as a fan, why should I be optimistic that this year's iteration of low-budget pass rush without big names and many hands make light work philosophy will be significantly more successful than 2019 through 2021, especially when my big coaching additions are secondary guys, not like Clint Hurt. The DC will have more time for the pass rush than he did as a defensive line coach, right? Tell me I'm wrong, please. Matty, you want to start?
Not really, because I'm not really sure how I can tell him he's wrong necessarily. What I'd say is the optimism is that Darrell Taylor can be as good as he wants to be, which is something I said before Clint Hurt ended up saying the exact same thing. So, yeah, I think Taylor's ceiling is crazy good, like legit, like, I don't know, Griff can speak more to that, but like a top 5 dude, like, I don't know how you want to measure that. But he just has the otherworldly traits. So, yeah, I mean, I guess he's the big name. But in terms of the rest of the D line, I mean, it's a bit like underwhelming. Nwosu seems to be having a great camp, like after 2 days that is, but he's flashing. And like, you know, if Taylor's as good as I think he can be, and he continues improving in what is basically his second season, even though he's a third-year player, then, you know, that requires attention that may take the load off, or not even take the load off, but create opportunities for Nwosu. But Griffin,
yeah. Wait, real quick, we're gonna interrupt your current programming to offer you this Mariners update. Ty, are you watching the Mariners game right now?
I have like game day on.
Ty France just hit the longest media single I've ever seen in my life. It bounced off the top of the wall, and I thought it was a home run, and I was confused why the left fielder like threw it as fast as he could to second base, because I thought that cleared the fence.
I thought your reaction was based off Taylor not being a top 5.
Every Ty France plate appearance is a gift. Okay, anyway,
yes, absolutely, yes.
Anyway, this is a Seahawks podcast.
Goins.
All right, so Matty, did you lead me with a question? I don't even remember because I rudely interrupted you. Sorry, American.
I was just saying I think Taylor can be that big name guy.
Yeah.
But and also I'll just address what Shiv said because Griff's is stalling. Shiv also asked about, you know, Hurt being DC not having time to coach the DL. Well, that is true, but it's also not like coaching staffs. Like, what do you think the DC does when they're in indies? Like, he goes and coaches his position. So he doesn't just sit there doing nothing. And I'm sure Hurt will be quite hands-on. He likes to be hands-on. I'd also say Aaron Curry is coaching the edge group last year, and there's continuation there. And I'd add that Clint Hurt, I mean, I'm sure he tried, but the pass rush coaching clearly didn't quite transition last year because they kind of weren't very good, other than Dunlap having some popping. But that's not really Hurt's fault. They just didn't quite have the talent.
Yeah.
And I think the talent this year is more suited to whatever scheme they want to run, to the scheme they want to run this year than it was last year. They tried. I think last year what really hurt them was Oldham Smith being cut, not working out, because he would have been that extra 3-4 outside linebacker type that they needed. And then when he went, then they were trying to put an Olsen Robinson there. Think about it now. You've got Taylor, legit pass rusher. You got Nwosu, who's more of a 3-4 type, more than Mayowa was, even though Mayowa started his career as that kind of type. And then you've got Tyreek Smith, who can do a bit of that. And you've got Maffei, who is supremely athletic, even and hand-eye kind of dude, even though he's not really there yet and isn't the most bendy. But they've got just more cats, with the big name being Taylor, is my prediction.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the way Shiv phrases this as this year's iteration, like we have to contextualize their rostering approach, because he's right. Every year, ever since after the 2017 season, they've gone into the following year with seemingly being undermanned. Obviously in 2018, along the D-line pass rush wise, that is 2018, obviously they went into the season having lost Averill to a career-ending injury. They traded away Michael Bennett, and then they drafted Rasheem Green, who was always ever going to be a project and a young guy too. So you weren't expecting a whole lot year one. And then Frank Clark was a question mark. It was, can he carry a pass rush, or can he at least be a number one guy? And that was a question that wasn't really answered till a month into the season. He was just so raw still, and you could say still is to this day. And then Jarran Reed had a career year, which he has not repeated. So they kind of made out all right 2018, but there was no reason to go into that year with any confidence for the pass rush. Then 2019, obviously they lose Clark. I think they make a good football decision in isolation. They trade him. They don't have to pay him that contract and stuff. But then they replace him with Jadeveon Clowney, who overall is probably an equivalent player, but as a pass rusher, not as good as Clark. And then even further, when you also trade away Jacob Martin, and Clowney's the only legit edge that you have, he's styled such that he can't create his own width. He needs other guys to create space for him. So it's like, even if Clowney was a identical pass rusher to Clark, if you could only have one when everyone else, say all things equal, you would rather have Clowney, or you'd rather have Clark if you don't have a lot of talent. Whereas if you do have a lot of talent surrounding him, maybe you opt for Clowney. So style matters there. So obviously 2019, they just did not have enough juice up front. They go into 2020, they kind of make those small ball signings. They bring in Bruce Irvin. He gets hurt. They draft Darrell Taylor. He can't play his rookie year. And they bring in Benson Mayowa, who I actually thought was exactly who they signed in 2020, especially toward the second half of the season. But yeah, point being is that they make these moves, and they're not quite getting the output that maybe they could. And that the output that they're going for isn't anything crazy, but it still theoretically could be enough to bring like return on investment, essentially. So yeah, then they make the trade for Carlos Dunlap, and it's like, okay, between Dunlap and Mayowa, that's if that can provide what that provided in the back half of 2020, then you think you're only adding to that with Darrell Taylor. Then obviously in 2021, Dunlap regresses until like the last month of the season. Mayowa regresses, part of it's scheme related. And then Taylor comes on strong, but it's like Taylor's just replacing what you lost with Dunlap. So now, again, we saw what the pass rush looked like this past season, the last 5-6 weeks or so, when Dunlap started to look like himself again, and you had Taylor firing off the edge. So it's like, okay, and that correlated with results in other areas of the field. That was essentially giving you what you want out of your pass rush. It's just, can they get that for a full season? So to answer Shiv's question, the reason why you're hopeful this year, and again, it's all relative to expectation and plausible or realistic expectation, is you're replacing Dunlap's production with Nwosu, and theoretically Nwosu being younger and having a clean bill of health recently and being a model of consistency for the type of player that he is, you're essentially able to ensure Dunlap's production for an entire 17, for an entire stretch of the season, for all 17 games. Then you also have Taylor essentially going from year 1 to year 2 in development. And then yeah, you've got Boye Mafe. So they I think have at minimum ensured the floor doesn't drop. And then they've also done things to where you have some room for the pendulum to swing toward the positive in your ceiling with the Mafe draft pick. So I think that there is legit reason to be not even cautiously optimistic. I think you should be able to be relatively firm that they've rostered a pass rush floor that can help them. It's not going to be their best unit, but it all it needs to be is just enough. And I think that we don't have any question about it being just enough now. It's just how much better can they be? Because that margin could mean the difference between that improvement in pass rush going from floor to ceiling could mean the difference between being, hey, a 10 to 15 unit to maybe cracking the top 10 in terms of measures that everyone agrees that would make them top 10, like efficiency, not just points per drive, points per game, etc. So, yeah, so that's my spiel. I think there's reason for optimism. So in ways that maybe wasn't there before.
So we have another question about the pass rush, which I think kind of this whole thing leads perfectly into from Hawkstrologer at Hawkstrologer on Twitter. If the Taylor, Nwosu, Mafe pass rush trio proves successful this year, what would their combined stats look like? I'll start with you, Griff.
I think Taylor's going to be a 7 to 10 sack guy. If we're just talking sacks, I think Nwosu is going to perform at his career average, which is anywhere between like 4 and 7. And then Mafe, I mean, I truly have no idea. I would put the over-under at 3, honestly. That doesn't mean that he won't be good. He could get you a lot of pressure. It's just sacks are so fluky, especially for rookies. So I wouldn't think any more than 25 between the three of them, and maybe 18 to 20 being the floor. But yeah.
Yeah, so like an interesting comparison is the Rams. So the Rams were third in team sacks last year with 50. And that was made up of 12.5 from Aaron Donald, which obviously Seattle doesn't have an Aaron Donald, but having an interior pass rush is kind of the way to get more sacks. And who that is on Seattle, well, I think Quinton Jefferson's better suited to the pass rushing 3-tech role than Kerry Hyder was. I also actually think, Shelby Harris is too. So
yeah, I mean, and that leads into another question, but
if we just talk about the Rams edge group, Leonard Floyd had 9.5 sacks and Von Miller had 9.5 sacks, and Lewis had 3 sacks off the edge as well, and Hollins had 2 sacks off the edge. But really, Aaron Donald creates a lot of those opportunities, and they also had Greg Gaines in the middle providing 4.5 sacks. So I think I'd say Seattle success. Like I'd consider top 10 sack total a successful thing. I mean, sack total is not the best metric, right?
Right.
Pressure is, pressure is one of them at least.
Yeah, and I didn't even address the interior guys with Shiv's question, but they've got 3 guys from the interior that have a pulse rushing the passer, and last year I'd say they only had 1, and that would be Puna. Even though Rasheem Green was getting you sack production, his pressure rate was really low. I mean, his sacks were kind of fluky, even though I was always rooting for him to kind of flip that switch and kind of finally evolve into his final form. It just wasn't happening. Quinton Jefferson is significantly better than Rasheem. Puna Ford, I mean, he still gives you something, but we're also waiting to see, can he hit another level? But I think Shelby Harris he's a significant contributor. He's an actual interior pass rusher. I mean, he ranked, I think, top 10 among interior defensive linemen in pressure rate, at least according to Sports Info Solution. Like he was like right at 10th, but he's a legit guy. I mean, he can speed rip, he can bull rush you. He's just one of those classic style 3-techs. And another aspect of this, to Shiv's question, we might see the pass rush further, like its potential further tapped into in ways that last year's potential wasn't able to be tapped into, because they have the corners to allow them to play the coverages that allow them to play even fronts, and those even fronts provide better spacing. I think, Matty, you looked at some numbers like their first and or I think their early down numbers when they were in even fronts last year, their pressure rate was actually above average. It's just they couldn't spend that much time in those fronts because they didn't have the slot corner to play a bunch of man coverage. That was the issue. So the downstream effect of having Justin Coleman is that you can play the fronts that will allow Darrell Taylor and Nwosu to tee off together and frequently on the tackles. And then as you're doing that, that allows the interior to work their games and stuff. So there's a positive domino effect that hopefully we see take hold. Last year, it's just the team, they were just missing skill set archetypes in the right spots to prevent some of their guys from being accentuated for the scheme they're trying to run. So I don't think they'll have that issue this year.
Yeah, and just to the point about interior pass rush again, so 10th in sack total was the Titans and the Browns. Well, the Browns are a poor example because Myles Garrett had 16 of those sacks. He's a unicorn. But the Titans, right? Landry had 12 sacks, so off the edge. Then Autry had 9 sacks and Simmons had 8.5 sacks, both off the interior. Which again, like if you have those interior rushers, they're really the most likely to get the cleanup sacks. Think about when Jaron Reed had his high sacks total. Like that was complemented by good edge work, but also some of it was just good cleaning up from Reed. So
right, I mean,
the stuff Griffin speaks about is big. Yeah.
So yeah, they don't just have the talent. You're not just isolating talent and saying, okay, well, they got guys. They also have the skill set composition, like you're saying. They've got edge burners, they've got speed interior rushers, and they have power interior rushers. So the skill set distribution also, it's kind of getting you toward the concept of greater than the sum of your parts too. Like they're not just, it's there's chemistry potential there. So
so last year Taylor had 36 pressures, Nwosu had 40. Obviously we don't know what Mafe is going to do, but I mean, considering like Taylor seems to be on the trajectory up, Nwosu seems to be on the trajectory up, is it like out of the realm of possibility that those three guys, if we say Mafe gets like 20 to 25 pressures as a rookie, is it crazy to say that they could combine for like 120, 125?
on the that's probably their max ceiling, I would think.
Yeah, I think it's the ceiling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how many snaps Mafe gets, obviously, right?
Right.
He'll feature the most in those nickel packages. I don't know if he'll be in there in Bear and he won't get a lot of early down opportunities, but also that just allows him to develop as a pass rusher, which will have bigger implications for year 2, so that when he is playing on early downs and maybe he beefs up a little bit or he's better suited to defend the run, when he does get those early down base opportunities to rush the passer, he's more ready for it. So yeah, we'll see there. But also, this isn't to completely dismiss Alton Robinson. He still has something there, but we'll see, I guess.
Mm-hmm. All right. So Rusty Cole asks, do you predict the Seahawks will continue to play bear fronts or a different 3-4 front? Also, what are your 2 favorite types of bears? So we'll answer the first question first. Do you predict that they will play bear fronts or a different 3-4 front? Matty?
Well, it will predominantly be what we'd consider a bear front, but in base, right? Like the other 3-4 front is the under, but with how like spread out stuff is and how perimeter it is, the unders basically become the bear, like, and variations of it, which you'd consider bear rather like there's. If you think about under and bear, under's just like bear is just shifted over under basically. So, and then like, I mean, it depends what you consider a 3-4 front, but like, there's only so many ways to do it.
The classic 3-4-2 gapping, true two gapping odd front where you've
Five
got
tech.
well even straight up head up 4 tech. Well, I mean some depending on alignment charts it's a 5 tech, but like you said, you've got the ends are head up over the offensive tackle, two gapping the B and C gap, and then you got the two gapping nose tackle. Like those days are gone. Like even all the Fangio teams right now, they're running bear, like the under or weak eagle, whatever you call it, adjustment, where you've got 1-3 and 1-4 eye or whatever. And of course, Seattle also likes the 4 eye and the true 4, right, as part of that. But the other guys in a 3 technique. But then where it gets interesting though is, and some teams are running like true tight, but what defines that though is not so much the alignments up front, but it's like the personnel package that you marry it with, right? So as far as front multiplicity goes, I think what might be interesting this year in terms of changes is again how many DBs they're matching it with and how many linebackers. So like the 3-3-5, are they going to have that Sam cover down, and essentially be an overhang and kind of be out of the line of scrimmage element, the front element part? I think we'll see that in the pinch. Seattle has run like nickel bear before, which I think is essentially, is that the penny package for Fangio? I'm forgetting.
3-3-5 is penny, but it's like 5-1-5,
Right. But like the difference, Seattle, though, is they've put their true off-ball weak side linebacker at that second spot. And granted, when that's been KJ, and KJ, that translates directly when he used to be an on-ball Sam when they're four down stuff. So now that skill set, the alignments might be similar enough, but the skill set is being replaced by a pass rusher now. So that allows them to keep up the pretense of, hey, either guy could be the rusher in terms of how they're attacking protections and stuff. Allows them to be a little bit more versatile with their fire zones and everything, right?
What I'd also say as well is if you are wanting to play too high and keep a too high presentation, but there's a slot to be able to cover down, there may be instances where you need the outside linebacker to walk out to that slot, and therefore up front you may have slightly different adjustments. So something like Nate Tice was tweeting out Jets clips, right? Of the Rex days. They'd play, and Aranda does this. They'd play like a 5 tech, so outside shoulder of the tackle to set the edge on that side. He'd bump out to that, and then a 0 tech, and then a 4 eye, and then a down at the line of scrimmage edge. And also, Kyle Scott comes from the Saban world where they have mint, which is you'd consider it like a different 3-4 variant. But realistically, it won't look that much different unless you're really paying attention.
Right. And like the techniques up front, we're going to see more like quasi two gapping, like the classic 2 gap, 1 gap stuff, or
more 4 eye play.
Right. And like that 4 eye is so important. Like the question, well, why go from 3 tech to 4 eye? For Seattle, at least how they've done it historically in recent years. Recently, that's oxymoronic or paradoxical, or just moronic, yeah. But they like to put the 4 eye to the side the tight ends on, because you've got that D gap has been formed now, the C gap and D gap, and that's especially when teams go under center, they'd like to run gap stuff to that tight end side, because that tight end has a free release if there's no end to block against an odd front, because that end is in the B gap, a B gap player. That tight end is just a free release to the second level and can pick off a linebacker. So Seattle likes to put, even granted he's still a B gap player, just literally being closer to that tight end, especially when it's Al Woods in a 4 eye versus a 3 tech, that extra couple of feet allows him to kind of scrape over or cross face on the tackle, or simply just be so large that it forces the tight end to come down on him as well, down block on him, and makes it easier for the second level to make stuff happen. So we'll just kind of see. I think we're going to see base bear stuff just with the usual adjustments therein. But nickel is what we'll look for in terms of how interesting things get. But to go like one step further, again, it's not going to be fronts. It's going to be how personnel is distributed. So I think keeping Shelby Harris weak as often as possible, so that when it is pass, he's getting that one-on-one. He's opposite the tight end. That means it's just him on the guard. And if they're leaving him one-on-one and he starts getting enough production, well, great. But if he's getting so much production to cause problems, they start sliding weak frequently enough or dictating the protection. That's where, again, you can bring in your 5-man pressures, and that's where you start to break the protection. If you can force them to protect one way often enough, he becomes that pivot point, or he becomes the anchor from which you can pivot off of. And that's with, sending Taylor, sending the linebackers, sending the safety, depending what the rotation is, etc. So
the other thing to consider there is if you're playing like base bear, who is the end, the 3 technique away from the edge rusher who you want to rush the passer becomes important, because then if you get empty, then that 3 technique needs to bump outside to play on a defensive end. And the guy down at the line of scrimmage can then cover down on the empty, the third receiver, or the extra receiver they've created by going empty, basically. That's sometimes they'll just stick in bear, but also there's times where rushing from a forefront versus empties advantageous. So having Maffei and Taylor and their kind of ability to drop skill set, that helps with that.
Yeah.
There also won't be that many snaps where they are playing based to like empty looks, but there will be the odd occasion. The 49ers love to come out in 21 and then spread you out like that.
Right. And we saw so much of that against Seattle last year, especially. I think they did it to Seattle more than they did other teams because they didn't respect their 4-man rush with odd spacing. So Taylor being in there, having skill sets where you can just constantly rotate in Shelby Harris and even Quentin Jefferson as Poona Ford, like you've got something there that you didn't have last year in base.
And who's the most edge like of the interior dudes?
Most edge like? Well, probably like in terms of like if you had to put them out on the edge.
If they're having to bump into a 4-man spacing from the bear look.
Probably Jefferson, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because he's like 290. I mean, so is Poona, but Poona's got a density to him that maybe
Poona ain't an edge, no.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't
so
tell him that though. Oh, and then we've got go ahead.
Yeah, what are our 2 favorite types of bears, Griff?
All right, so I'm going to go historical a little bit. We have there's the I think they're called the cave bears. They were I think native to like North America and like Siberia, but they're just these ginormous monsters that I think hunter-gatherers like hunted to extinction like as recently as like 15,000 years ago. But these things were like bigger than Kodiaks, like I think a full 2 feet taller than them standing up, like just mammoth. So those guys are cool just by count of being the biggest bear that's ever existed on planet Earth. Then the next coolest bear, I mean, so there are like different subspecies of black bears all over the planet, right? I think we've I think like is the sun bear like a derivation? I don't know. But those guys, they're so, I mean, they will hurt you. Don't approach one if they feel threatened. But they're docile and just like, they're like just like pansies, and they run away from you if they see you, but they're just kind of doing their thing. Like they're these big like beasts, but they don't act like it. I don't know if you've ever seen panda eat stuff. It's like adorable. And maybe panda.
That was going to be my choice. I was gonna go panda and sun.
Panda's not a bear, surely not.
It is.
Yeah. But panda's a great choice.
Zoologists and like conservationists drive themselves crazy though with pandas, right? Because they won't do what's best for themselves. Like they're failing the Darwin test like every year. Like they refuse to mate, they refuse to eat things that are healthier for them. They just want to, like, it's like they're in their retirement stage and they're just
sleepy boys
enjoying themselves. Yeah, I don't know. How about you guys? Your favorite bears?
Well, like I said, panda and sun bear was my
okay.
That's my vote. That's my choice, Matty.
Okay, so the cinnamon bear looks really cool.
I've never heard of the cinnamon bear.
Nor had I, but very nice color. And then Paddington Bear.
Wow.
Great bear.
Oh, is the cinnamon bear real?
Yeah, no, the Paddington Bear is
Yeah, I'm changing
comes
my
from
pick to Pooh Bear.
no, Paddington would he owns poo. Trust me. Like he
Oh,
comes from
yeah.
darkest Peru. He eats marmalade sandwiches. Like
Mm.
Paddington knows what's up.
So if I saw the cinnamon bear in nature, I would have thought I'm looking at a grizzly or a brown bear or something. But apparently, it's just a black bear that just has like a red hair.
Different pigment.
Maddie, do you eat marmalade sandwiches? Is that like a
No,
thing?
marmalade's trash.
Oh,
It's garbage. I don't get people who eat that shit.
But you'll
And
eat Marmite and Vegemite.
no, I eat Marmite. Orange peel is not good. Like
you eat Marmite?
yeah,
Marmite's good.
yeah, Marmite's really good.
Oh,
Have you had it?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, you'd love it. Maybe.
Oh, okay. What does it
Maddie.
taste like?
That is a hard question. Like malty, salty,
Mm,
umami.
mm.
Put that on toast with loads of butter.
That actually sounds.
Wait. And butter? Those
And-
textures they're not
What are
like
you
having
talking
a fist
about?
bite in your
What are
mouth.
you talking about, bro?
You said butter and
Yeah, the butter
Marmite?
melts. The Marmite is spreadable. Like, what are you thinking it is? Some treacle sort of thing.
Okay. I guess the texture is that the texture similar to jelly,
No,
or
it's
it looks gelatinous.
it's like thicker honey.
Jesus.
Texture wise, chill. It's not actually
Okay.
honey.
Okay. Sorry. Well, I guess like you put jelly on toast sometimes.
I put jam on toast.
Jam. Okay. Jelly
Confiture.
jam. I say jam more than jelly. What do you guys call
Really?
preserves over there?
Well, preserves are a thing, but jam.
Okay, you guys just don't do jelly. That's like an American abomination.
We do jelly, but it's not.
Is it an import, an American import?
No. We do jelly like wibble wobble jelly on a plate.
See, we have this disgusting stuff, and only Smucker's sells it. It's like the fakest stuff you can imagine. It's just like classic grape jelly and
Yeah.
disgusting, but
yeah.
it's like a delicacy, under the age of 10. As soon as you're older than that, it's just you're going for the stuff that only you can find at Trader Joe's, is what I'm saying.
Word.
The organic.
Yeah. Anyway,
All right, so we got a couple more defensive line questions, and then I think we're getting into some secondary stuff after that. So,
Finally.
can you rate? This comes from Scott V. Myers. Can you rank the interior pass rushers? Griff?
No.
Shelby Quinton Puna. Al Woods has a bull rush that you can't sleep on.
Mhm.
It pops every so often. And then I'm gonna put Miles Adams ahead of Al Woods. And then
Ooh, spicy.
and then I'll go LJ, just because he's still technically, that's still his domain more than it is for Al Woods. And then I'll go
yeah,
Mona.
LJ just got smacked around there.
I'm still rooting for LJ. But hey. So
Matthew.
the current Mariners game is a test of how many balls can you hit to the warning track and not hit a home run.
Okay, that sounds so bad. I'm so sorry for you.
insane.
Jared Hewitt is above Matt Gotel. I agree with Chris' ranking, other than I'd have Miles Adams ahead of Collier. That's so disrespectful.
Miles Adams might be.
But I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
he
know if I
could.
believe that. Anyway, me and Griffin are aligned on that, so
Okay.
Got
let's
it.
go.
Got it. I'll agree. Just to save time. All right. So this comes from Scooby Slips at Scooby Slips. Do you think?
By the way, they have like the best. Is it the Twitter username? Like their ads, all right, but their Twitter username is very good.
What is their Twitter username right now? Gonna go look real quick. We're gonna do some investigating right now. Yes. Very nice. All right. So, do you think the Seahawks have a big end on the roster that can two gap from a 4 in their weak/strong reduction fronts? I don't think that's Jefferson and Collier. Maybe Woods. Also, how often do you think they're going to play heavier techniques with the big end? Matty.
So it's not Collier based on his showing against the Titans last year, where he looked like he'd forgotten how to mirror step, which is what that is describing. I don't think it's Jefferson either, though he could probably do it in a pinch. It's definitely Woods, because we saw Woods do that, and Griffin's already kind of spoke about that, but we saw Woods do that last year, similar to how Red Bryant did it. Now, it could also be Poona Ford. Poona Ford brings a kind of different style to it. They've obviously lost Rasheem Green, who did that a bit. I think, like I said, Jefferson could do it in a pinch. Shelby Harris could definitely do it. But really, the main guy will be Woods. It's just then, if we're talking weak or strong reduction fronts, that's kind of early down deals.
I mean, that's why they're an odd team now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But
so it's most likely to be Woods. But if they're wanting to get a bit more pass rush out on the field, I think Harris can do it. Jefferson, I'm less confident about, but because he's just lighter, but he can still do it, and Poona can do it. And if you've got those three out on the field, you should be getting enough pass rush if you're really intent on playing that kind of big on like a neutral or even passing down.
Yeah. Yeah, like it's kind of it's like we've already said, it's because the whole like reduced weak strong thing, that's been kind of part of their even front structure, right? They want to close off the B gap bubble while still having like even front organization for their whole team. But now that they've been an odd front team 2 years running, now they're entering their third year. It's already taken care of. But again, it's like they're not going to really be true two gapping from a 4 technique over the tackle. I mean, again, it might be a game to game adjustment where they might put a guy in a true 4 and be like, you have to, hands on the armpit, true 2 gap technique, read react stuff. But it's just going to be it's going to be like very circumstantial. When they are playing even front base, it's going to be when they're playing teams where they get a lot of gap scheme and they're not reducing. They're playing like you have a legit B gap bubble now, and the big end is playing 5 technique, 1 gap, on the outside shoulder of the tackle. And that's Al Woods, and they're doing that to kill C gap problems, right? Or they're reducing to the nose side, and when they're expecting a lot of like counter weak ball on the boundary, and they want the weekend to be in a 4 technique so that he can deal with the C gap problems there without a tight end to that side, which is something like LaFleur likes to do. I think he likes to run stuff to the boundary, to the non-tight end side, and then Shanahan will do some like counter weak and stuff like that, and that's maybe where you'll see a 2-gapper to the weak side. But I know it's hard to, I can't even visualize it myself right now. I'm just spitting out words. But
something that I think they're going to do more commonly is that big end playing in an even front from quite wide, and rather than having him line up in the B gap, having him, and this links, Scooby, to the second question you asked about playing heavier techniques with the big end, having him crash down into the tackle. There's a really cool play from last year on 3rd and 7 versus the Rams, where the Rams tried to run at the matching Ugo Amadi side after creating an extra D gap. And essentially what happened was Al Woods, oh no, it wasn't Al Woods, it was Rasheem Green playing end, but then he smacked down to the tackle, which bought the time for everyone to fit off that, because Ugo wasn't in the fit and they were having to cheat the numbers back. Now, what was also cool about that was Al Woods lined up basically a 1 tech and then smacked the guard back, like played through the guard into the B gap. So the B gap just disappeared because it was getting crushed on the C gap and it was getting crushed on the A gap. And so the Rams tried to run at it and they had to bounce out into cornerback force, and then Green disengaging. So in terms of the heavier techniques thing and using the big end in situations like putting maybe in a stress situation where you'd want the 3 tech to the other side, maybe putting the big end to the nickel in even fronts, that is something where you could play heavier and work stuff out to free up the match a bit more. That would be a cool thing to see. It's a great play. I've got an article coming on that. So.
And they've got, like your article will show, they've got the personnel to do it, so they can kind of be whatever front they want to be. And
they're
then also,
hybrid.
Yeah. And then Matty, you mentioned behind the scenes, Seattle dipping back into some fronts of the tank front. Do you have any thoughts there? Do you want to insert, speaking of what fronts they might play this year?
Well, that's one where you get a reliable edge, right? And you can, if you want, you could put a big end out wide and crush still. But also you can play heavy, really heavy in the middle and buy time.
But real quick, define the tank front though, because it's Seattle term, at which they may not be calling it that anymore.
Well, it's an over front where you have Seattle traditionally would have had a 2-eye and a 3 technique. So like over G.
The heavy 2-eye, heavy 3, right?
And very heavy. And that was, they'd twin that with cover 3 bars. So Cam would come down into the strong hook. He'd technically have the A gap fit. But because of the heavy techniques, he'd be able to play from a bit more depth in this strong hook. And they'd still ask him to, if it was 2x2, match the second seam. And so to buy him the time to do all of this, you play heavy up front. And it became their, like, in the Legion of Boom days, it was like if a team started going shotgun a lot, like the Packers, the Broncos in the Super Bowl, they just ran this stuff, and Cam was like a death backer coming in. It was actually quite modern because they played it from like 2-high presentation, basically.
Right.
Especially if it was a passing down.
Allowed, yeah. I mean, it cheated math. Like Cam Chancellor was a pass first player with a run fit, and that heavy technique protected him. Because I think it's over and he's passing strength. I mean, he was a gap player basically.
Yeah.
And the 3 technique was protecting him, and what makes that particularly interesting is that when you mentioned that, we went back and watched a little bit of Sean Desai in Chicago. He was playing in essentially the same front, and he was doing it because his team's best trait after all the injuries they had ended up being their edge rush. And they didn't even have Khalil Mack, but it was Robert Quinn and some other guy that looked promising. So the tank front allowed them to stay in 2-high, at least often enough, and still accentuate their edge rushers, let them have wide edges, but it allowed them the interior was able to hold up just well enough that they could play just enough 2-high so that when they spun down into 1-high, it kept up the pretense to where it was still a potential possibility, not a foregone conclusion to the offense that they were going to spin down. And it allowed to ensure that their edge rushers were constantly going. So it was just this systemic, like, stirring the cauldron, like trying to make it all fit together. And granted, it didn't work that well because the Bears were not a good defense last year. But that wasn't Sean Desai's fault. They were like skeleton crew out there at times. But you can see his ideas, and you can totally see how that translates to Seattle. And Pete Carroll sees it, I was like, oh shit,
Seattle already kind of did that like last season against the Packers. Now, it wasn't always a 2-eye deal, but if you look at the Packers game when Seattle's playing Cleo coverage, so Adams is in the hard quarter and he is in the run fit. Seattle, when they had the 3 tech to his side against the Packers in an even front, they played that 3 tech super heavy, and that would have put Adams in the A gap, right? But he's fitting it from 2-high. So what Seattle actually did was they pirate stunted their 3 tech into the A gap, and then they had their end go from the C into the B, or from the D into the B, and it bought time for Adams to just fit off it. Brooks was able to fall back, and then Adams was there to join the hit as well. And Wagner just played the front side B gap.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it also allowed the boundary corner to be the force player, right?
No, there's just the quarter side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was just basically getting into kind of bare spacing post snap. with
Right.
Brooks being the last edge player, but he'd start off the ball.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
there'll be clips of that in Cleo Part 3, which is the how to beat Cleo and how not to beat Cleo section, which is run fit, which people thought they could beat it and they couldn't because of the stuff Seattle did up front.
Right. Good stuff.
Do you guys like defensive backs? You like secondary play?
I do.
Yeah. All right. Well,
Yeah.
we got questions about that.
Let's do
We've
it.
got questions
Wow.
about that. Let's get into it. All right. So this comes from Hawk Astrologer again. How many interceptions do you predict from the Seahawks DBs this year? What would indicate success in this production category for each of you? Griff?
I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know actually what the Rams numbers were.
I do.
Okay. You go ahead and lead then.
They had 19 interceptions, which ranked third.
Damn.
Does that not
Darn.
fit your narrative?
It doesn't fit. Well, where I was going with that is Seattle's MO last year was preventing pass attempts. And part of like that scheme doesn't invite a lot of throws downfield. Depending on where those interceptions occurred, maybe they're like tip balls over the middle. I don't know, just deflections and stuff. But like one-on-one situations, I mean, even when they were targeted one-on-one and they defended them well on the perimeter, they didn't always have the length to really come down with interceptions. Like that's one thing with DJ Reed, as good as he wasn't going to get you a lot of interceptions probably in contested situations. Trey Brown probably isn't. He's going to have to get his jumping routes when he's playing like a cloud corner or something, you know. So I don't really know how many interceptions there are to be had, but they definitely have to force turnovers, hopefully an improved pass rush,
well,
more man coverage.
Turnovers, eh? That's an interesting one because I wrote in December 2021, the 2021 Seahawks are not generating turnovers. They actually finished with the least turnovers in the league with 13.
Right.
The most was 30. Now, turnovers are somewhat random, but like Griffin says, the pass rush is big. And Seattle wasn't. They were dropping deep. They weren't really in positions to take the ball away. They didn't have necessarily the players. I would say a Kobe Bryant. He takes really aggressive angles to the football. Like he understands routes and he undercuts them, and he will play the ball. So if he's playing, might go up. But their turnover, like Pete Carroll always stresses, it's all about the ball. He's always about trying to take the ball away on defense, and they just didn't do it well last year. So, how many interceptions to predict is difficult, but in theory they should have more because, I mean, it's hard not to have more. But
how many interceptions come on back targets, running targets to the running back? And so like they led the league in targets to the running back, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And then they also, in terms of most targets, and they also led the league in fewest pass attempts, 10 yards or greater downfield by percent of total snaps.
Yeah.
So, and that's both good and a bad thing. It's complicated, both those numbers. But so it's tough how to answer that question. Let's just say I want more interceptions.
Yeah. So what would indicate success? Well,
at least crack top half, you know,
top 10 again. Like who came 10th last year? The Titans with 25.
Wow.
And that number does fluctuate.
So they have to double their turnovers, essentially.
So last year they
even cracked top 10.
Yeah. So
I don't know if they're going to get 25.
Last year they had 7 interceptions, which is the least in the league. So they actually need to basically almost quadruple.
Right.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'd say like their ceiling might be like 15 to 18.
You said 13 total turnovers, not interceptions, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So you think their ceiling's 18, Ty, which is
like interceptions?
Yeah, which last year would have placed 18 interceptions would have placed sixth in the league. So that's not bad.
Like it depends on obviously the cornerbacks, right? Also, who is going to be the cornerbacks and how much is that position going to fluctuate? How much of that is going to be, different guys rotating in? Are they going to land on, a pair of outside starters that are going to stick for the majority of the year, or is it going to be kind of a revolving door? That's the other thing. So I would say that's like max, like absolute ceiling. You said they had 7 last year?
Yes.
And that was with Reed playing great coverage. Yeah, honestly,
it's what Griff spoke about, the whole so many throws to the back, and then not very risky throws because teams didn't need to, but also Seattle was taking away. That's a messy element. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd say probably like, I don't know, if I had to guess what they end up doing, probably like 13. Like I can't imagine they do just like 7 or below that again. Like, right?
Hopefully not.
They can't be worse than that, right? Like,
right?
That feels really bad. That's like really bad. Yeah, but
yeah. Well, especially when it's your whole MO as a head coach is to take the ball away and protect the football. Like, come on now.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to move on?
Yeah.
All right. Which coverages? This comes from Scott V. Myers again. Which coverages do you think the Seahawks will run the most? What differences will fans notice? Matty.
Oh. Well, they ran the depending on who you listen to, the 5th most middle field open or the 4th most. So they ran a lot of middle field open coverage last year. I'd expect their most run coverage to be a quarter half variant this year, based on how offenses are trending. That doesn't mean cover 3 will die because you have to be able to play cover 3. You have to be able to get +1 in the box at certain times. Same with cover 1. Griff will have some interesting stuff to say on the cover 1 aspect of this, I think. But my opinion is quarter half, or half quarter.
So
and the fans you will not notice much of a difference. You just might feel like you're seeing more people like too high.
Yeah, they're not going to run like any more too high than they ran last year. Those splits will stay the same. It's like within their 2 high bucket, within their 1 high bucket, we're just simply going to be seeing some cover 3 replaced with some cover 1, and then some cover 2 replaced with a combination of cover 6 and cover 4. Carl Scott comes from the team that likes to run for the Vikings, that likes to run quarter, half cover 6. And then obviously Seattle was running a lot of, and Sean Desai has ran a lot of half quarter, which is you're playing cover 2 to the opposite side of the field to the passing strength instead of the weak side. Seattle, there's necessity for both for every team. But I think like the biggest difference is that we're going to see more like pure quarters. Sean Desai didn't run a lot of pure quarters last year, but Carl Scott did. So it's like a blending of we're going to see more half quarter, and that will be Desai's deal, which was again already Seattle's deal. But his thing is, okay, let's just do even more. And then Carl Scott's going to say we're going to do pure form quarters more. But again, also a little more cover 6, which is still quarters family. The biggest difference, I think, is just going to be the more nitty gritty. So like in cover 3, Seattle, I think they're really aiming to be able to rotate strong again, like they did with Cam Chancellor. And that means flopping Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs at times so that both either can be the passing strength or passing weakness. Again, you don't want to rotate strong with Quandre Diggs on early downs, but that's something you can do with Jamal and task him with a run fit on early downs, where you might actually be expecting the run, but still be able to get the pass defense elements that you want, which is essentially you're getting a hook zone, but from depth, so that you can kind of kill and breaker stuff while staying gapped out.
Well, an area to rotate Diggs strong would be like to trips, right? Like put him down to or 4 strong
Right. Well, for the same reasons that you would want to rotate any safety strong, it's just that you only want to do that in passing situations with Quandre, right? Whereas with Jamal, it's just winning back the ability to do that on early downs, right?
Yeah.
Because like there were times where there was merit to rotating, showing too high, which Seattle did quite a bit last year, then rotating strong into cover 3 with Quandre. But it's like there were times where that was warranted on the early downs, so they would only do it on 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 7, right? So we might actually see a pinch of that on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 8. You know what I'm saying? Like now with Jamal, or even 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. So that's because I mean, what makes Jamal special is the versatility and that all coming together, just being able to be rotation proof. Your whole defense is kind of what gives you ultimate flexibility, not just for cover 3, but the fire zones and stuff like that, and how you run fit from quarters as well, and run fit from too high, all those things. So I think that'll be one of the biggest differences. Now, the other minute difference, double in the detail stuff, is when they are playing quarters, are we going to see some legit cover 7 man match quarters checks here and there? It might be a 3rd down thing. They might have like one base call for it, like just basically mod, right? Just which is kind of the classic base version of cover 7. Where it's essentially quarters as we've known it, but the underneath defenders have slightly different rules. They're playing man techniques, more eyes on the receivers, the receiving threats, a little more. It's tighter inherently.
Is it 2-man?
Very, very. Don't ask Carl Scott that he might blow a gasket. But so beyond that, we're not going to see any differences. Now, it would be cool if they trot out like a trips checks cover 7 and run like Stubby, against trips, which is something that some guys around the league do, but again, only on 3rd downs for the most part. But they
Third
have
down is just playing with your food anyway.
Right. They have the best guy in the NFL to institute it, though, in Carl Scott, being an Alabama assistant. So that's
now that Jeremy Pruitt's left the Giants.
Right. Indeed, because then he would be surely the first best. Anyway, that's all I got for that question. I think more cover 1. Yeah, see more cover 1.
Matty, anything you want to add?
Well, Griffin spoke well on this, but like the amount of cover 1 you're able to play is influenced by the fact if Coleman hits, then they can play a lot of cover 1. But if he's not all right, then I doubt how much Ugo can play. They kind of need Coleman to hit if they want to play cover 1 a lot. Also, the pass rush, like the ability to get pressure with 4 dudes, is very important if you are wanting to play cover 1. But they go hand in hand. It's the whole chicken before the egg, or whatever the hell. Pass rush or coverage is basically both, which doesn't work for the egg or the chicken, because it can't be both, or can it? I don't know.
Just make the omelet and we're good.
Yeah, and the thing with an omelet, do you guys have this expression? You can't make an omelet without eggs.
You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. I've never heard that one.
You haven't heard that one?
No, I've never heard that. We don't have that here.
All right, so we got a.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, real quick, some trivia for you. I don't know if this is true. My French teacher told me this. The origin for the term omelet, it was some French like nobleman, aristocrat, whose last name was like Malay, and some cook was, I think it was a woman apparently. She was like scrambling eggs or doing something, like it was not an omelet. And then she like messed it up or left it alone. All of a sudden, like it formed an omelet, and she flipped it over and it was an omelet. And then she's yelling, "Oh Malay," to this person, or maybe it was omelette. I think it's a hard T. And then that's how the term omelet originated. It was this person exclaiming, "Oh, so-and-so." And that guy's name happened to be Malay or Millette.
Where are you at with omelets? Because my opinion is...
I love them.
Oh, really?
You can put anything in them.
You can put anything in a sandwich, like...
Yeah. So Omelets are like omelets are great. Where are you at with omelets, Matty?
I'm not in a good place with them. If I'm making like a quick eggy dish, I'd go carbonara.
Hmm.
Or just scramble your eggs. Just scramble them.
No,
What's
see,
wrong with
I'm
you? Just put
lazy, so
loads
I
of
scramble
butter.
them. But
Yeah.
Scrambling does require patience if you're going to do it properly.
if you're going out to a restaurant, you have the option between an omelet or a scramble.
I'll have the ham, egg, and chips. Or fries, sorry.
So wait, so what do they call potato chips? They call them crisps,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we don't need to
Yeah.
get into this. It's
Yeah,
fine. It's all
okay.
good. We're all
Alright.
mates. Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
Okay,
Matty's
so
about to start the War of 2022, the sequel to the War of 1812.
You always go on about this war. I
the
just don't
third
get
in
the
the
big
trilogy.
deal, guys.
this war. So we have another question from Shiv, or as Tom Wamsgans would say, Shiv. Pete Carroll comes from the Monty Kiffin too high defense and then pioneered the cover 3 Seattle defense the whole league adopted, or so it seemed. So in the wake of Desai's quote that this is still a Pete Carroll defense, what is a Pete Carroll defense? Because he was playing defense very differently at USC and even in earlier NFL gigs. And that's the question.
It's a great question from Shiv there. Matt, I know you have lots of thoughts. One thing I'll say before you give your answer, Maddie, is that, like Shiv alluded to, I mean, he certainly ran a lot of single high stuff at USC, as you'll talk about, Maddie, because I know you've watched a lot. But like, it's important to emphasize that Seattle becoming the cover 3 team in the NFL, they got there organically. It wasn't Pete working backwards from the conclusion of I want to stay in single high, I want to fit the run, and our corners can handle it, and our deep safety can handle anything that they throw at us. It'll be fine. Like, they arrived on that very just naturally, and it was what necessity demanded. It was what the league demanded at the time in order for them to be a good defense, and given their personnel too. And then the cover 3 persisted because as there was turnover, their remaining players, their best players, Bobby and KJ, they were best at playing hook dropping into hook zones. If you're going to become something fundamentally different, I mean, sure, but you're paying these guys like a total of like $25 million a year. Do you want them just taking running backs out of the backfield? Like, lean on your best players. So that means everybody else has to play cover 3. So, and they made some technique changes over time, but which is where the hidden adaptability was, the hidden multiplicity that's been talked about. With, even though the call is still cover 3, it's like there's way different things that matter that are much different than when it was Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor and Maxwell and Sherman and all that. But so what will make it Pete Carroll's defense is that what they're arriving on is the best. It's the best way that to flow from what they have available to them personnel wise, and it's reacting to what is best suited toward defending a lot of the concepts, and also we will see their own wrinkles on it. That will also matter. So go ahead, Maddie.
Yeah, time and place, I'd say. Like, that's what his defenses have been. It's like the right time, the right place to run this thing. Like, it's for the right people. It's all about having as much simplicity as possible, but having enough multiplicity to defend stuff, cause problems for guys. All while the idea of the simplicity is so that your players can play fast.
And
I guess
yeah.
he chose, yeah, and it's literally just like trying to kind of exploit the kind of best scheme answers at the time for
Right.
like the concepts they're getting. Like, so that's why, like the Kiffin deal, like everyone says it's like, you know, this whole 4-3 under thing. But if you like look at a Kiffin playbook, yeah, there's 4-3 under in there. There's under China, which is like a big Kiffin call. And there's other cool stuff, but really, like, defenses have so many answers in them each time. There's just like certain calls which get like accentuated and gravitated because they're like
Right.
I don't know, because they're like the base cool or whatever. But really, for Pete, it's just about taking the meta, like
Right. And we have to remember, and Maddie, you have this on good authority a lot. When they formed their cover 3 stuff, that the even though like people think, well, it's really Pete Carroll's scheme, and yes, it is, but the assistants had lots of autonomy in forming that, between Gus Bradley, who's kind of joked on now, but Bradley, Rocky Seto, Ken Norton Jr. I mean, all of them had huge input on the installation and the nitty gritty details. So like it was like they had just as much latitude as Desai, Scott, Hurt, John Glenn have right now. It's really no different. It's just the current version of it. I mean, Pete Carroll's 70 years old. Like, scheme doesn't impress him anymore. He's seen just about everything. I mean, I'm sure he watches tape on college programs and all this, the league trends that are happening. Like, he's aware of this. And in when he was doing that podcast with Steve Kerr 2 years ago in the off season on the onset of COVID, Steve Kerr was sharing a story with Pete there on air with him about how when he was getting into coaching, he was talking about like, well, people should listen to the podcast because I'm not representing it well, but he was telling the audience this conversation they had with Pete, saying, well, what should my offense be? What should my defense be? And Pete was like, none of that matters. Like, he's essentially saying, what's your philosophy? What tone are you setting? Basically all the subjective stuff, all the stuff that's easier said than done, but is probably really the hard part. Think about how many smart football coaches there are out there that can't make any noise or stick around because they don't know how to run a team. So what will make this a Pete Carroll defense, regardless of what they do schematically, is that he's setting the stage, he's setting the tone. He's allowing everybody to do their thing within his framework of, subjectivity. Well, stuff that we identify as subjective. That's ultimately what will be Pete Carroll's ultimate mark on it, is how he delegates, is how everyone feels when they come into work and stuff. Obviously, we're outsiders. I have no idea what that's like, but it seems to be positive, and that's what will be, I think the reigning Carroll aspect.
So in 2010, Pete Carroll's book Win Forever. As head coach, I set the vision and philosophy, but it is the coordinators and other coaches who are charged with implementing it on the ground with the players every day. You can teach people how to coach football and the nuances of the game. It is no secret, after all, that I've basically been running the same defense I learned from Monte Kiffin in the 70s. Blah, blah, blah. Specific plays aren't what made all those USC victories, and they aren't necessarily what are going to power the Seahawks. And so perhaps the most powerful weapon in the Win Forever philosophy is the drive to be constantly be looking for ways to improve. That mentality makes a huge difference when I'm looking to hire coaches for my staff. And like Griff said, like, the way I understand it is, in 2010, that was a coaching staff coming together with ideas. They'd also had a background at USC together. And okay, that is predominantly with a 4-3 kind of structure. They did do some more kind of well, it's not even with a 4-3 structure. That's the thing. Pete's always had a hybrid kind of defense. He credits Kiffin because I think that's where a lot of like the 4-down stuff came from, and a lot of like his answers to when he's getting like problems like pirate stunts and stuff like that. And the importance of a B gap bubble and what the bubble allows you to do, and then how the players kind of fit off that. Like, you listen to like a Bo Pelini and the stuff he's talking about, like the keys that things give you. But then Pete has also learned from like his time at the 49ers and the hybrid elements of that deal with Seifert. And then at USC, he started doing bear stuff to defend the spread. Like, again, it's just the whole meta thing, but it's more about letting a coaching staff come together in his philosophy, and being on the cutting edge of this is what's the right thing to do now. Like, Gus Bradley came up with all the indicators and the pattern matching of NFL concepts and the cover 3 match that Seattle was running. Now Seattle didn't fully match because they didn't need to. It also fit the personnel. And then like now you've got a blossoming of young coaching staff again. Like, I don't necessarily think Ken Norton Jr. needs to lose his job, but him doing that and the kind of reluctant way that Pete did it is because there's all these young coaches ready to be on the same page of installing a new defense. Why this one feels slightly different is because the language, based on certain things which may or may not have happened, is actually different. Like, it seems to be the Fangio tree. But that, if anything, just rams home the point. And I'd love to hear Pete Carroll asked about it. Like, this is the first time you've used different language since, well, we've seen a USC 2007 playbook, but I've seen drawings from like 2003, 2002, like, and images where the language is all the same. Now, when did Pete, maybe Pete with the Patriots use slightly different language? I don't know. But to me, the fact that he's changed his whole language over it's a pretty big deal. Because that's been his whole thing, and he always had the roots to Kiffin. Now, this season, it seems like he's not doing that. That seems like a big deal, but then it also just reinforces that it's never really been about X's and O's with him, even though he's very good at them. Like, you have to be, you're a coach, right? But it's more about the overarching philosophy, having everyone on the same page, and sort of making things, whatever you do, make it as simple as possible, which is very difficult to do, and make players be able to play fast, make plays, take shots, and that yeah, I don't know. I want to hear Pete Carroll asked about the Kiffin thing.
Yeah,
and then one more thing we should remember though is because some people there's obviously a lot of talk like, oh, Pete's finally embracing modern football and stuff. Let's just remember, like, this is not the first time the league has been too high. It's what the aughts were. It's what the zeros were. It's Peyton Manning was,
well, go further back. Teams. Go to when Pete was with the Jets and they drafted Aaron Glenn, small corner, and they were playing like quarter half, like on all, like most of their plays when they didn't need to have
it's just all defender. It's all cyclical, and we're all being prisoners of the moment right now. And also, the same thing is already happening to the Fangio and Staley offshoot branch tree that happened to Pete Carroll's tree. The assistants are seeding throughout the league, and then the staffs are subsequently stretched thin, and they don't have the talent. And a lot of those teams right now are not doing any better than Pete Carroll's teams did, or Pete Carroll's assistants teams did if they didn't have the talent. Right now, like the best Fangio teams right now are not ran by Fangio or Staley. They're ran by Raheem Morris for the Rams because he inherited Staley's personnel. Now, Raheem did good stuff for sure, but he had elite talent. Staley's Chargers were not that good this year because they don't have the talent. The same reason why all these others. So it's just the principle of it's all about the people ultimately. And I think that's kind of Pete Carroll's realized that scheme is great, but you need people. And that's why Pete's been shaking things up. And it's easier said than done to simply get back to being a top 5 defense. But even when they've fallen, they haven't fallen that far. We have to remember, like, they've only been below average in terms of how often is the offense scoring on you one time since 2011. So 2 times during Pete Carroll's entire Seahawks tenure have they been a below average defense in terms of points per drive. So it's just like, let's remember to put it all in perspective. So yeah.
So like you guys said, the Pete Carroll defense seems more like it's philosophical rather than anything schematic, because obviously the meta is going to change. There's, like you said, Matty, kind of time and place really with everything. You talk about the different spaces that Pete has found himself in, whether it's the college game, whether it's 90s NFL, like that's different. It's just a different time. That's just different sport basically. And so it just, that's always going to change, but the philosophy is always going to be the same, which is, like you said, play fast, create turnovers, all that.
Well, when Desai said this is a Pete Carroll defense as well, like this is still a Pete Carroll defense. I feel like that's more it's one, not wanting to undermine Pete, but 2, it's, I think Pete has initiated this change and he's probably okayed like all of the stuff they're doing, and he's like, this is a good idea, and probably had suggestions and the final say on certain things, right?
I would think so. And
You'd
part of
hope
why,
so, because he's had so
right.
much experience of all of this and knows.
And the reason why these hires were seemed like no-brainer hires to make is because they don't have a lot of work to do in terms of
It's the direction they were
change.
going.
It's where they're headed. It was just, again, it was further proof that it's organic, and they're getting really like a star-studded assistants to help shape it and mold it. So it just makes all the sense in the world. It's going to be Pete Carroll's defense, but it's also going to be Clint Hurts, and it's also going to be the size and Scott's, and so it's like it's a team game, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously they wanted to get guys in there that were a little more familiar with what they were eventually going to be teaching, which, what they were already heading towards. So it'll be interesting to see how that, plays out this year. And we'll probably get, little more tidbits of information here and there over the coming weeks. And, we'll have a better idea of what's going on. All right. So we have one last question from Patty. What kind of recon do you need from practice?
I need a high focal lens camera. I need that zoomed in on paper. I need nice resolution pictures of paper. But also,
what is on the paper?
Well, we don't know. There's no way you could know that. Also, and Griffin can speak to this, but how much tight splits they're using on offense, how much under center, how much under center running. I don't want to steal all of Griffin's stuff.
No,
Griff,
you can.
Well, I'll talk defense. Defense. How much are they staying in too high for the whole sort of duration of the snap? How much is one of the safeties sticking to the hash, whereas one of them's like, or almost to the hash, like in between the hash numbers? How much is one turning their body and getting over the top of the one receiver, basically? Are the edge rushers sticking to one side of the field, or are they running to the short side each time? That's useful. So if you're going to training camp, please, at me, at the podcast.
One like glaring, and then offense. The two glaring things to look for is, are we seeing a predominance of dig routes under center or gun, and who's running them is another interesting question. I think Tyler Lockett and Noah Fant make the most sense, like right off the bat, but all the tight ends are going to have to be running them. We know we're going to see Metcalf in a pinch because he was the main one running them last year for like under center play action. But then is Eskridge getting involved downfield? Unfortunately, he's been nicked up so far, which is not good. But if he can be an actual option downfield for them, especially in the intermediate, then that just gives them this sort of like ambidextrousness for when they want to run certain concepts, because it's playing him and Lockett off of each other and stuff. Also, the biggest indicator that you might see from training camp and offense is, are they running from shotgun a lot? Because if they're doing that, that means that from that follows like a whole stream of things as far as what the overall picture will be like. If they aren't, it means things are going to be looking very different, at least in intention on paper. Results are a whole different question. Yep. But yeah, gun running, yes or no?
How much?
Yes or no? Right.
Yeah.
How much?
Cool.
Also, be sure to let us know who's in the best shape of their life.
Right. Who's in the best shape of their life?
Apart from us three.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm definitely not in the best shape of my life.
Oh,
I'm definitely getting cut heading into camp. Yeah.
I've been in better shape.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely get cut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Thank you, everyone, for your questions. I hope we have answered them well. Be sure to check out part 1 if you didn't. If you're thinking, why hasn't my question been answered? Well, it's because it was an offensive question, not actually offensive, but it was on the offense, and so we did that last week. Please do rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. We're now on Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify. You know, give us 5 stars, please, and write something nice if you really can. And subscribe to my YouTube, where this is also posted, and you can see our ugly mugs. Follow the podcast. That's Seattle Overload. We're not going to do the Val thing again, but follow all of us, and we appreciate you. Thank you.